Because the catalyst isn't a complete solution, public health officials here are now fighting for cleaner alternatives to petrol altogether. The battle against benzene and the other pollutants in motor fuel has triggered the world's most far-reaching campaign against the petrol-driven engine.
We are talking about taking this basin, give or take 10 million automobiles over the next 20 years and moving away from fuel and cars as we know them today. We're going to have cars in California that at a minimum in the next 10 years will be 80% cleaner than they are today. And that'll make them about 120% cleaner than cars sold anywhere else in the world. And that's just the beginning.
People enjoy driving cars in California. What we've done is not to interfere in that relationship. We've tried to reduce the amount of emissions coming out of the car without actually taking the car away from the consumer.
One of the things that we're always concerned about is whether or not we will, in fact, have the technology to meet the standards. And we tell the regulatory agencies this. And their basic approach is to force the technology.
Now it's being forced on them. GM are revealing the first step towards a cleaner car.
Looks like a Chevy. Sounds like a Chevy. Runs like a Chevy. It's a Chevy.
This Chevrolet will run on gasoline or methanol. GM has woken up to the fact that California is serious. If they can't come up with a clean car, they can't sell any car at all.
We don't always agree with the regulatory agencies, as you can imagine. Nevertheless, we recognize that the regulatory agency is charged with responsibility for trying to clean up the air in the state of California. And obviously, the automobile contributes to the overall air quality problem, and we want to take the automobile out of the air pollution problem. And to the extent that we can develop technology to do that, we certainly intend to do it.
Methanol is toxic and highly corrosive, but it emits less hydrocarbon. It's a standard engine, but with non-corroding fuel lines and an optical sensor to detect the ratio of methanol or gasoline in the tank. The problem is, pure methanol doesn't start easily below 8 degrees Celsius. That won't happen in sunny LA, but the fuel is mixed with gasoline for cold starting elsewhere. The result is very little benefit for air quality. And with only one methanol pump in the city, cars will be running on gasoline for some time.
Methanol has been promoted as the fuel of the future because it was seen by the automobile industry as the easiest fuel to introduce because it's a liquid, it's just like gasoline. We've now come to realize that the air quality benefits of methanol are not as great as we had thought at one time. We're also coming to realize that there are other very good alternatives and that we don't necessarily have to take such a small step. Los Angeles has monumental problems. There is no one solution, and so it does have to be thinking very long term. They have to be thinking of zero-emission vehicles.
For zero emission, read electric car.
For electric car, read kitty car.
To wean consumers from their gas guzzlers, General Motors has developed something just as macho to replace them. Their concept electric car, the Impact, can outperform the best in production sports cars. 0 to 60 in 8 seconds, top speed 100, or range 120 miles, driving at 55.
People have a concept of electric vehicles that they're essentially golf carts and they're not going to be viable transportation vehicles. What GM proved with the impact is that if you go about it right, if you start from ground zero, look at all the aspects of the vehicle that you need to look at, it could be made a viable product.
But no manufacturer has broken the technology barrier of the battery. 120-mile range is as far as anyone can get.
It's been a chicken and egg problem in the past. People who design vehicles say that they don't have a battery that could go the required range and the acceleration rates. And people who design batteries say they don't see a need for it. So there has been an impasse on designing a vehicle.
Today, the car is back under wraps. GM aimed to have it in production in 2 years. More electric vehicles mean more electric power to be generated. Critics say that that just pushes the pollution back up the energy chain.
Now, of course, you have to take into account the emissions from the power plants. When you do that, you find that the benefits for electric vehicles in California are huge. But that's because in California, much of our electricity comes from hydropower and from natural gas. Now, if we do that same analysis for the entire United States, where about half of the electricity comes from coal, which produces a lot of carbon dioxide, in the United States as a whole, we still get almost complete elimination of carbon monoxide and hydrocarbons. That still means that electric vehicles are a major air quality benefit. And we've done the analysis for Germany also, where there are a lot of low-quality coal is used. And even then, the net effect is a substantial reduction in emissions using electric vehicles.
Daimler-Benz in Germany is watching Los Angeles closely. California is the largest auto market in the world. Where it leads, Europe must follow. Daimler is working on another ultra-clean fuel. It creates no pollution. It emits only water. Hydrogen.
It's also the most explosive fuel around.
Daimler-Benz has come up with an ingenious way of keeping the gas safely under control. They store it as a solid. Cooling water is pumped in alongside the hydrogen. The tank is packed with a powdered metal catalyst surrounded by tubes. Incoming gas passes over the metal and, cooled by the water, combines to form a hydride. Only when the metal is heated by exhaust gases is the hydrogen released into the engine. The range isn't good. About 6 industrial gas bottles to get as far as an electric car. But if there's a crash and the tank bursts, the hydride powder stays harmless.
The problem is the cost. Now, right now, we do make hydrogen industrially. We make it from coal and petroleum, but that's not very attractive to us because it's using a fossil source. What we want to do is make it from solar energy, where we get almost zero pollution, zero greenhouse gases. Right now, the cost of making hydrogen from using solar technology, and that is taking water, using solar cells to split the water molecule and take the hydrogen and then use the hydrogen, and then we can transport the hydrogen anywhere we want and store it as we want it. Doing that has a very high cost. It's much more expensive than gasoline or oil, but we're making tremendous improvements in the technology. Now, if those improvements can continue to be made into the future, then we'll start seeing the cost of hydrogen being perhaps not directly competitive with gasoline, but in the same ballpark.
Until cheap hydrogen is available in quantity, it too will remain one of California's dreams.
This vehicle operates on more than one kind of fuel. It burns normal gasoline, and it also burns compressed natural gas. That's methane. It's one of a small fleet of test vehicles that's operated by the Washington Gas Company. The filling station takes methane from the main supply pipe and compresses it on site. It's then just a case of filling up the cars. The compressed methane is kept in this cylinder. It's compressed to about the same pressure as the air in a scuba diver's cylinder. The gasoline is kept in the usual place under the car. And the exhaust, when this vehicle is running on natural gas, the exhaust contains pure carbon dioxide and water. Environmentalists are not as keen on this clean fuel as one might think.
The problems with using methane hydrates as a fuel would be tremendous. The production and distribution system would be subject to the same kinds of leakage of methane into the atmosphere, amplifying the greenhouse effect, as natural gas use is today.
So what's the answer? Many are asking that question. A few are working in secret toward a solution. The prize will be enormous for the one who finds a cheap way of converting methane gas into a liquid. As our world relies on liquid fuels, the technology and infrastructure which now serves oil could remain virtually unchanged if methane were to be liquefied.
What we've got to try to do is to persuade methane to combine with itself to build up a carbon chain which has 5 to 10 carbon atoms for petrol. And to do that, which is really quite difficult, we need to use a catalyst. And I've got an example of a catalyst here. See, it's a solid. And a catalyst acts really as a broker. It helps persuade these methane molecules to combine with each other and build up this carbon chain. Now, in fact, it's a very complicated process. And to make the catalyst function effectively and efficiently and produce the products that we want, and not to produce the products that we don't want, is really one of the major challenges in the research program to make methane conversion a reality. Oh, conversion of methane into liquid fuels is an enormous prize for the company that does get it right. It will take time to get it right and to have an efficient, proven, cost-effective process. But I'm sure we shall get there, and there is an enormous benefit for the industry, for the consumers, and indeed possibly for the environment as well, because we're dealing with a clean feedstock and turning it into clean fuels.
What we're learning is that we can use market forces. Instead of telling people exactly what they have to do, what we'll try to do is incorporate the full costs of air pollution, of greenhouse gases, in the prices of the goods and services they're receiving. And therefore, instead of gasoline being $1 a gallon, we'll make sure that it includes all of these other costs and that people will then pay the full cost. And then they'll change their behavior in response to that. And automatically through that process, we'll have people using cars less, we'll have them ride sharing, we'll have them buying alternative fuels and electric vehicles because those will be cheaper and more attractive.
Will market forces create a new lifestyle for the other LA? For the people with the oldest cars who drive the greatest distances to the most polluting industrial jobs? The optimists say that air quality will create new wealth for everyone.
The themes of the problems we struggle with here in Southern California is really the theme of urban man on this planet. How are we going to handle multiplying the population on this planet from 5 billion to 10 billion? What's Mother Earth going to look like 20 years from now? Where will the solutions to those problems come from? Those solutions are highly marketable, not only here in Southern California, but in the world as a whole.
California is a wonderful place. There still is the California dream. It's not what it was perhaps 20 years ago, and I think it can still diminish a fair amount, and people will still be coming here. I'm optimistic that we will make these adjustments. Initially, it'll be technical fix adjustments, but I think slowly we're going to make some of these other changes that are more long-term in nature.
I doubt that we will satisfy the federal clean air standards by the year 2007 or 2010 or whatever is required by current legislation. But if having the targets there means that we continually progress, as we have progressed in the last 15 or 20 years, I think it's less important that we actually meet the formal target as long as there is measurable progress from year to year.
While you've been watching this film, 5,000 high-emission cars have been brought into the world.
The world has a long way to go.